Hi, this is Chip Conley from MEA, and I am here with three MEA alums, one of them a faculty member, facilitator as well, all of whom are really well prepared to talk about a conversation that I want us to have right now, which is what the heck is happening in our modern world with climate change around the topic of fires. And I will talk to Don Hutchinson about that. Then we'll talk a little bit about grief around dealing with tragedies in our lives, whether it's natural disasters or something else, and talk with Lizbeth Hamlin on that, who has both dealt with being in a catastrophic fire, but also she does grief counseling for people and is a therapist. And finally, we'll have Barbara Tint. Barb Tint was an MEA alum who became a facilitator, and we're working on a storytelling workshop with her as a faculty member because she is one of the best known storytellers of understanding how do you make sense of your story, not just on stage to make people laugh or make people curious, but also to make sense of it for yourself. So, Dawn, you're you, I think of you as Wonder Woman, because whenever you're coming to an MEA workshop, and you've been to many, um, it feels like you've just come off of dealing with a disaster. Uh, and um, we're doing this at eight in the morning or 7 in the morning Pacific time on Thursday, January 16th. What can we know about this particular fire, and where are we going with climate change related fires, especially in places like California?
Well, this particular fire is due to the fact that we have had a severe drought in California, and really, there's the wind events have been getting more intense and more often. Like we don't usually have them in January, right? I've been doing uh, going on fires for almost 2 decades, and I've never gotten called out in January until this year.
Mhm.
So when you combine high wind and dry vegetation, and you have houses built in the landscape where all this vegetation is, there's really nothing you can do um, to fight it. The, that wind was so high, it was knocking down trees and power lines, and um, there's it's when you, I mean, when it gets to that point, there's nothing you can do other than run, really. The firebrands are going from, get landing on people's houses and getting in their eaves and um, their vents and lighting their houses on fire. And there's just nothing, no way to stop it when the winds are that high. So it's
So
just,
how are we going to deal with this moving forward?
yeah, either people are going to have to make their houses more fireproof, use fire like siding that doesn't catch on fire, and make sure they have closed eaves that the brands can't land in and catch their house on fire, and closed vents. That's, yeah, harden the houses. If you're gonna build in the landscape where there's vegetation, you need to build better houses.
What I mean on a personal level, no, first of all, let's be clear that you work in the office trying to use technology to understand the progression of fires and how to deal with them. But you also are out there in the field and you're actually in the fire zone dealing with it. What is it like being in a fire that is of the kind that we're seeing today? I mean, what is it, is there something beautiful about it? Is it extremely scary? Tell us a little bit more.
It's uh it's not scary. I've never been scared,
Hmm.
but I have, it's just sad. It's really sad to see. Um, so
Even if there's not homes or people involved.
there's good fire. So
Mhm.
there's such a thing as good fire, right? The landscape needs to be burned not, occasionally to get rid of the understory so you don't have these fires that take off and burn intensely and go into the upper canopy that just take off. But it's a whole different thing in the urban area. So when houses become fuel, it's a whole, yeah, sad.
Yeah. And Lisbeth, you had to deal, thank you, Don. Lisbeth, you had to deal with, houses as fuel. You live in Sonoma. In 2017, there was something called the Tubbs Fire. And
Mhm.
can you remind us a little bit about what that experience was like? And it was sort of the advent of maybe the massive fire in somewhat urban area.
Mhm.
You were living there.
Right, right. I could see the fire on the ridge, but I didn't have to evacuate. But it was massive. Of Within about 4 or 5 hours, about 7,000 homes went. That it was my initiation to what's called, I think they're calling it monster storm, firestorm, where the wind and the fire makes its own weather. And what that means is it's just going to take you down.
Mm.
It's going to roar through. And I think we were completely unprepared, and how it traveled down, through the valleys, and took out many, many homes. And of course, it was a time that I think people believed in, firemen. Firemen will come. Well, um, fire stations burned down. So, it was a real awakening. And because of my background and trauma and psychotherapy, I had a lot of people in my practice already, and also colleagues and really, really dear friends. Things that I lost their homes because they were familiar to me, and loved them. And so once I found everybody and where they were, I felt better. I was like, like wanting to gather all my significant others. But it was to walk around, and I am sure this is happening in LA. You just walk around in shock, in an acute PTSD, and it's collective. So I'm just going to my local hardware store, and I'm hugging people that I don't know, and I'm teaching them how to work with their nervous system. This is the way that I know you can work with your nervous system to kind of calm everything down,
Are you saying,
and
Elizabeth, are you saying that's happening right now because,
no, it happened in the
oh,
Tubbs
okay,
fire, where
got
it was just you'd be walking down the street and you could just tell, you know,
Uh,
what that people were just in shock. And so I had clients already that lost their homes, and then people knew that I, do a particular kind of trauma protocol, and so I would see, some people to come through this, and it's still this is activating everybody. LA, we are all connected. Okay,
I was going
we're
to
all
say,
connected.
I,
Yeah.
ma- I imagine anybody who's gone through a tragedy before, especially if it's a fire tragedy,
Hmm.
feels a trigger
Totally.
as a result
Yeah.
of what's happening in LA right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to come back
And
to your
so,
protocol in a couple of minutes and hear a little bit more about that because I really want us to be practical. I want the people who are watching this, listening to this right now to know a few tips. But let's go to Barb. And Barb, I've known you for a while. You're an MEA. You came to MEA right before we had COVID, so you dealt with tragedy. You literally landed on the campus right as we were going into COVID, and you've been an alumni, but you're also a facilitator of our program and soon to be, even a full faculty member. And you're also a university faculty member dealing with psychology. And so as a psychotherapist and MEA facilitator, what's your perspective? You've dealt with grief with people as well. Um, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I have been lucky to not personally ever be involved directly in fire, but I've been close to people who have, and I've certainly been very, very closely involved in tragic grief-related circumstances as I have in my own life, and those dear to me. So, the reality is that we are going to be seeing a lot of PTSD, as Elizabeth is talking about, for a long time, and people will process grief differently, right? We think there's a map for grief, but there actually isn't, it's not formulaic. People will process it differently. For some people, it will be more complex, related to other events in their lives, related to the level of support they have or don't have. There's a lot going on out there about comparative grief, like, okay, you lost your house, but you're not dying in war. I think we have to be very careful of that. I see
Sounds
it.
very American.
Yeah, right. I'm seeing that in
My
social.
grief is worse than yours.
Exactly. In my field, we call it a competition of victimhoods. I'm a psychologist and I worked in conflict resolution. And so we have to be really careful, I think, to find that balance. Yes, I think every day, right? People talk about gratitude practice. Yes, let's be grateful you're alive and make space for the heartache of what lost. It's really a both and people really, really are going to need support for a long time. And that includes being with people who can actually sit with it. I've had people tell me, God, it's taking you so long, right? As if, somehow I've run out of time to process grief or whatever. And something that Lizbeth said that I think is really important, that there is this quality of it. It actually can bring people together, which is at MEA, one of the things we know about life is that community is one of the most critical things for a meaningful life, whether it's when we're 20 or as we're moving into midlife and beyond. And that these kinds of events do have the potential to bring people together, even across divides. In Sri Lanka, after the tsunami, you had the different factions in the political conflict coming together to work on the disaster. After things settled, that they went back to their separate corners, right? So I think that there's this combination of whatever kind of therapeutic intervention works for you, surrounding yourself with the people who can be there and support, to not put yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to be feeling better or feeling grateful. I mean, empathy does not start with at least you didn't die, at least, right. And to really understand in some way that wherever you are is okay in this process. And hopefully there will be infrastructure support. Hopefully there will be emotional support. It has to be systemic as well as personal. And fear is a real thing. I think what's happening now is like the crises from yesterday are causing, fear and anxiety about tomorrow. And so we want to be thoughtful about processing what's happened, as well as being proactive about helping people imagine what could be coming.
Yeah. So Lizbeth, do you have anything you want to add to that, especially that's applicable, that including if you want to give you a Reader's Digest version of your protocol that you use?
Well, I want to just piggyback a little bit on Barb, is the need to tell story is really, really important. And that is part of one of my protocols, because I'm an EMDR therapist, which is bilateral, tapping of some kind. I have people tell the story.
Like these things kind of?
No, like this,
Okay.
and to tell the story, just go all the way through the story. People forget things. And what I would weave in between when people are telling the story, tell me, the first thing you remember about that day, and tell the story. They remember things they never remembered. And I would, in some ways, just kind of insert, just going, and you survived. Because people don't believe they survived. They're still back in their house somehow, or they're back in their car, they're trying to get their kitties, or something is happening. And there's a way that when trauma happens like that, or fear, people kind of split, they forget. Another part of the brain really takes over. So part of that protocol is to tell the story, really tell the story. And that story needs to be told, that narrative needs to be told, sometimes many, many, many times. And I see that particular in grief itself. People need to talk about whatever they lost, whether it's their house or mementos or this or that, or their partners. For whatever reason, at this time in my life, as I'm now in that mid 70s, I have a lot of people in my practice that have lost their spouses. I didn't really notice. And then all of a sudden I went, oh my goodness, and then was approached to, facilitate a widows group. And it's just been profound because there's nothing to do except be present, really be present with people and hold them and say, of course, everyone, like you said, Barb, everyone processes grief differently, but community is absolutely vital and telling the story. So there's that. And also this, you put one hand under one armpit and this one over here, and you hold yourself.
Mhm.
This is what I was working with in Ace Hardware. When people were coming into Ace Hardware, I go, okay, and then you just breathe into that so that the nervous system can begin to just settle, even for a moment, because that's what gets activated.
Let's go Barb and Lizbeth, and then we're going to go back to Dawn to wrap up. But what's the most comforting, helpful thing a friend can do or say when someone is going through grief?
Mm. I'm here.
Mhm.
Whatever you
Yeah.
need, here,
Hmm.
and be there.
Hmm.
Lizbeth, anything you want to add?
Yeah, is that I have found that asking people in acute grief or loss or shock, trauma, to ask them what they need, they don't know. It's too much for them to know what they need. So it's just like going, oh, I'm going to call every day, or I'm going to text you every day. I'm here. I'm thinking about you, or are you home? I'm going to come and pick you up. We're going to go and have tea. That there's a place that I have found that's been really helpful, to not expect people to know what they need. Just give it to them. Give them
I'm gonna
something.
bring you a pie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the question, how are you, is sort of a challenging one. It's not a good question
Yeah.
to ask,
No.
correct? I mean,
Mm-mm.
no.
Yeah. No. Not like Barb. It's just, I'm here. No,
Mm.
I'm here. I'm thinking about you. I'm supporting you. I love you.
Yeah, beautiful. Dawn, let's wrap with you. I bet you've seen a lot of people in shock along the way. And what's that experience been like for you?
Oh, well, sad. It affects me totally, but I try not to let it. I gotta just keep doing my job, and I feel for him, and I try to, be as understanding as I can. But there's, nothing really I can do. Um, I'm
You
not.
know, given the profession you're in and how it's changed over the 20 plus years that you've been doing it, what what's your feeling internally about being in this profession, being in the firefighting profession, both in the office but also in the field? And, is there a level of hope and confidence that you have, or is there a bit of a Sisyphean? What is it when the guy who's pushing the rock up the hill
Physicist.
is Sisyphus? Is there a little bit of a Sisyphus complex going on here, which is, this is too much? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh yeah, sometimes every year I think, "Yeah, I'm really getting tired of this. Can I, is there someone who can take over for me?" And there really isn't. I haven't found anybody who can. I'm on a type 1 California Interagency Incident Management team, and I run the GIS shop. And
What do you run again?
the GIS shop, the Geographic Information Systems, in the planning division. So um,
It's a big job. It's a
it
huge
gets
job.
it gets a little overwhelming, and uh, I'm climate crisis, which Barb told me is the new name for it, scares me. I mean, fires are just going to get worse and worse, and this problem is going to get worse and worse. And fire season used to be June to November. Now it's all
Okay.
year long. And I'm, I just, and
Yeah.
it's not just fires, it's the hurricanes and everything's getting worse. I just
Yeah,
got
you were
back,
just in Florida, right?
got back from Florida working on the hurricane stuff. And it's like, I haven't been home in 8 months hardly.
Mhm.
So if there's one other piece of advice I want to give to those who are watching and listening is it's not just giving love and care to those who are going through the grief, it's actually helping the helpers. As Mr. Rogers talked about, whenever something's going wrong, look for the helpers and actually go hug the helpers because they could use a little bit of love as well because they're going through grief and dealing with a lot. So I just want to say thank you to the three of you. Really, on very short notice, yeah, you joined me here on this call, and I think this call is going to be helpful for a lot of people who are, um, even if they're not in the fire zone, even if they're just seeing it from afar, and they're just feeling the tragedy of this. And we have tragedies all the time. World War II and World War One were full of them, and so it's not like tragedy is a modern thing. But what's a modern thing is this weird sense that the climate is changing, and whether it's hurricanes or it's fires or it's twisters or it's whatever, or it's extreme weathers that will make people refugees, um, we got to figure this out. So thank you so much. Really,
Thank you.
Love you, Chip.
Everybody.
you too. Now let's see, how do I turn off the recording? Here we go.